Halloween over? Oh no, man. And I gotta do this video anyway? I am like literally exhausted from editing this series of videos. Like it's like such a slapped ass put together production too. Just cutting the fat out of me talking and then putting trailer footage over it. As simple as it can get, and I'm exhausted. It's like hours of footage that I gotta go through. That's like way too much. But anyway, this is the final part of this series. We're gonna be getting into the modern era of Universal Monsters, which means I'm gonna be honest, I'm probably gonna bitch the most. This is not gonna be a good vibes. This is gonna be old man screams at Cloud, with just like a pinch of positivity thrown in. It's gonna be great. So this is gonna be focused on the 2000s through the 2020s, I guess, the modern era, kind of where we're at now. Let's get into it. I thought there was actually a little bit more from the 90s. I guess not. Okay, so yeah, 2000s. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman. I did watch that one. It's been a while, but I recall it for a Chipmunks Halloween special thing. Pretty faithful to the original Wolfman. You actually have the character of Larry Talbot. I feel like I keep mispronouncing Talbot. Like my brain overthinks how to say it every time, which causes me to screw it up. Is it Talbot or Talbot? Larry Talbot? Whatever, we gotta fucking move on, dude. Yeah, Larry Talbot is actually a character in this. He is the Wolfman, and just like in the original films, he's kind of brooding and a bit of a downer. I'll just say it was, for a Chipmunks movie, it was way more faithful than it needed to be. After that, we have The Mummy Returns from, I didn't write it down for some reason, but I think that was 2001. So this is a direct sequel to Stephen Sommers' Mummy from 99. This one's probably not as good as the first one, but it's still, I think, a lot of fun. It definitely leans more into the action-adventure side of things, which is great, honestly. I love that kind of stuff, too, you know. Yeah, we're getting further away from the horror movie elements, but it's fine. It's a fun movie. We have Imhotep returning. I love they kind of recreate the scene from the original Mummy where he's, like, looking into that, that water, the show, like, The Past. So again, Stephen Sommers is a fan, and he's actually demonstrating that in the movie. Like, you don't have to include stuff like that in a remake, but I just think when it's appropriately done, it's cute, it's fun, I love it. I love just showing any sign that you actually are a fan of the source material. I feel like this one gets a little bit more critiqued by people, mainly because of the Scorpion King character played by The Rock. Shows up at the end as a fully CG character. He's like half The Rock, half of Scorpion Monster. And yeah, the CGI on the face isn't great. Everybody's made jokes about it. What can I say? It doesn't look great. I do love his entrance, though. Like, it feels like out of a Harryhausen movie. So, and you know, to me, it's like you got Universal Monsters, you have Harryhausen movies, 50s sci-fi, Toho, kaiju kind of stuff. This is all just classic movie monster stuff. It all kind of goes together. It's all part of the same interest to me. I obsessed over all of these things as a kid, and I love all this stuff still today. You know, even though it's a shitty CGI character, the way the scene is laid out, it just feels like the centaur from, I think it's The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. The way it enters the scene, very dramatic, very cool. I love it. I thought about if I should, talk about the Scorpion King spin-off movies because they are technically related. I decided not to because one, I've never watched them, and two, I just feel like, do they really have anything to do with the Mummy at this point? I feel like we're getting way off topic. Between 2001 and 2003, there was a Mummy the Animated Series. This is again based on the more recent Mummy films. I never watched this one, so unfortunately I cannot comment on it. So we're going to keep it moving and head on to 2004 with Van Helsing. Once again, this is a Stephen Sommers movie. Out of the 3 Universal Monster films that Stephen Sommers did, this one gets the most hate. The Mummy movies get a lot of love by certain people. I don't hear anybody loving Van Helsing, and I get it. It's stupid. It's clunky. It's a little too CGI heavy in a lot of areas. Like, this is kind of when you could tell certain filmmakers were getting way too cocky with the CGI, and it's like, okay, this isn't really cool anymore. It's just kind of exhausting. But if you can get past some of that, just turn your brain off. I think it's a fun movie. I was a little disappointed when I first watched it in theaters. I tend to be a bit of a purist about things, and I felt like certain things weren't exactly how I wanted them. But after seeing more recent years, sort of how they're interpreting these characters, Van Helsing is like perfect. so much love and care put into this movie. So just real brief, this is about Professor Van Helsing. I don't know if he's a professor in this one or not, I can't remember, but either way, it's a young Van Helsing played by Hugh Jackman, kind of like an action hero Van Helsing. He's going to kick some ass, he's going to take out some vampires, it's going to be super rad. And this movie is kind of like Stephen Sommers' version of like the House of Frankenstein or House of Dracula. Because if you remember, in those movies, you have Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman all in one movie. And that's basically what we have here. We have Dracula as kind of like the main villain. I really love the actor's performance in this one. Just very, like such a bougie Dracula. I love it. Just slaying every scene. Then you have the Frankenstein monster who, interestingly enough, I thought they were going to make it more like the Universal film where he just kind of like, rah, fire, bad. But they kind of went, he looks a bit like the Universal film, just a more beefed up version. But his voice, it feels like they're taking more from the Mary Shelley novel. He's very well spoken. That was a little off-putting when I first watched the movie, but now it's fine. I don't mind it at all. And in fact, I love that, not just taking from the original movies, but also the novels. You have 3 werewolves in this movie, which is interesting. I don't recall if the first werewolf only appears in the first scene. I don't recall if we ever find out who that werewolf is. So I'm just going to say that it's Larry Talbot. Unless I'm wrong, unless they did specify, we'll just say it's Larry because I like things to be consistent with the original films. And then he ends up infecting one of these people that are like werewolf hunters. One of them gets scratched, and then he eventually scratches Van Helsing. So Van Helsing himself becomes the third and final werewolf. This is a crazy movie. There's a lot. I could do a very lengthy video talking about this one because there is just so much. There's a point in the beginning of the film where we're introducing Van Helsing and he's fighting Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Of course, it's like a big hulking version of Mr. Hyde, which that's another one of my things that kind of like was a little iffy on when I first watched the movies. Like, I'm pretty sure the book said Mr. Hyde gets a little bit shorter because Dr. Jekyll was mostly good, so his evil half wouldn't be as strong. But in recent years, I've created more just headcanon that maybe in this world, Mr. Hyde, just his evil power got stronger, and that's why he turned into a big hulking beast. But either way, it was cool just because when I went to see this movie in theaters, I didn't even know that Mr. Hyde was going to be in it at all. So it's like, okay, cool. Then once again, I did not watch this, but in 2004, there was Van Helsing, The London Assignment. This was an animated prequel, I think, to Van Helsing. I think it deals more with his quest going after Mr. Hyde, because we get the end of that in Van Helsing, so I'm not entirely sure if that's what it is. And I feel like if I watch this, my headcanon about Hyde's power making him get bigger might be proven wrong, which would be super disappointing. But yeah, I'm eventually going to have to watch that someday. I am curious. The final film of the 2000s was The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. And I almost feel like I shouldn't even include this one because we're getting very far removed from the Universal Monster connection. In the previous 2 films, Imhotep was the mummy, who is the mummy in the original Karloff movie, just kind of like an updated version. In this movie, they decided to explore mummies of different cultures. And turns out in China, they also have mummies. Other than that, I really don't remember a lot about this one. I just remember I did see it at the drive-in, and I was very underwhelmed. Okay, so the 2010s officially begins like the really disappointing era for the Universal Monsters. Technically, the first movie of this era is The Wolfman from 2010. I feel like this is technically more of a leftover from the 2000s. To me, the 2010 Wolfman is the end of kind of like what a 2000s horror movie was. Like we're reaching the end of that era of ultra gory, extreme excess. It has a lot of gore, which I wasn't sure how to feel about when I first watched this. I kind of just wanted a straightforward retelling of the original story. This one took a lot of twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. But if you are into like more extreme stuff, the effects are really cool. Like it's mostly practical gore effects. Rick Baker designed the Wolfman makeup, and it looks very much like the original Universal design, just tweaked enough. I really dig it. He did a great job on that. The only effects that fall a little flat are the maybe the transformation scenes, which I think they originally wanted to do practical, but they were running out of time, so they had to do it with CGI, and it looks just a little bit awkward, mainly when they show the face. I don't know, CGI face transformations just don't work. I think it would have been better if they just showed a little bit of the physical transformation and then maybe relied more on cutting away, like maybe showing people's reactions and then cut back. But again, this was the 2000s. It was all about excess. I feel like we haven't really gotten far away from that. It's very much that mentality of, we have CGI now, we can do anything. But they don't stop and ask, should we do anything? Usually the answer is no, you shouldn't. You should maybe be a little bit more subtle. So this movie does change some things from the original storyline. I think it keeps the main beats the same. Larry Talbot is coming home to visit his father after his brother died. There's some crazy twists and turns in this one in terms of how his brother died. Like, I'm thinking, how much should I even talk about? Because, I don't know, if you like big budget gothic horror movies, which I kind of dig that vibe, grand, epic, gothic horror, I don't know. Kind of like the Coppola Dracula, for example. This isn't maybe as slick and fancy as that one, but it's in that same kind of genre. But there's a pretty big twist at the end with Larry's father that I definitely wasn't expecting, and I wasn't a big fan of when I first watched it. Looking back, I guess it's fine. In retrospect, it's kind of what the Hammer movies did. Same basic story, but they changed certain elements to make it their own. So I do respect that. I love that. Okay, so now we're officially into the Jesus Christ, what are we doing era. Everything just feels like a misfire. Yeah, Van Helsing was very over the top, but it was still the characters you know and love. The Wolfman movie was, again, very over the top, but they get the basic gist right. From this point on, it's like nobody cares. Basically, all the studio execs are like, Marvel's making all this money with their cinematic universe. What characters do we have in our catalog? And for Universal, it unfortunately was the Universal Monsters. I say unfortunately because even when I first heard about this, I wanted to get excited, but I was just like, they're gonna screw this up. I know they are. Like, I wanted to be optimistic, but it's just like, if they're just doing it to have their own version of Marvel, then what chance do they have? And that was made very clear with the first movie of this era, Dracula Untold. So this movie's pretty fucking stupid. It starts off very promising, is the thing. I love how it starts off. So this is basically an origin story for Dracula, showing how he became a vampire. And so he's kind of like a Vlad the Impaler type of character, fighting in battle, and he needs help to help his people win this war that they're waging, basically. There's going to be a huge attack, so they're completely defenseless. So he basically finds this ancient vampire that's living in a cave, this very creepy, ghoulish creature, and he gets this guy to turn him into a vampire so he can use his vampire powers to fight the war. Okay, so this is good so far. I love how it starts off. Now, if this was like a movie written by a smart person that's not like a mouth-breathing troglodyte, then here's what would happen next. Dracula would win the war, which is basically what happens, but then the tragedy would kick in. Again, Universal Monsters are tragic. So the tragedy is that, yes, he has all these powers, he can protect his people against this army, but now he's a monster. Now he's a blood-sucking creature. And basically, in the movie, it basically just... He helps his people win the war, and it's almost done in like a cute way. Like, I recall there's this part where, like, he turns into a bunch of bats and helps, like, a priest float down. Like, I think a priest is, like, falling, and he helps him float down or lifts him up. He does something to save a priest. I forget exactly. But it was very cute. It was like a kid's movie. And it's like, God, this is cringe. This is bad. Like, this is really fucking bad. And that's basically how it ends is, yay, Dracula saved the day. And that's kind of when you realize, okay, that they're trying to make it into a superhero. And like I said, Monster Force, that show, they got it right. Dracula is the villain. He should be the ultimate bad guy. In this stupid fucking movie, he's like a superhero. It's cute and it's fucking terrible. What should have happened, like I said, after he wins the war, the monster should kick in. The bloodlust starts to settle. He has to start feeding. So what does he do? He starts feeding on his own people. He starts killing them. That's when it becomes a tragedy. It becomes horror. That would be a great story. I tried to like this movie when I first watched it. It's like, it's not that bad, but God, it was just so stupid. So stupid. Just what a complete miss the point of a character. It kind of reminds me, did I talk about this? I don't think I talked about this yet. There's, I guess in the 90s, they were going to get the rights to do a Spider-Man movie. This was before the Raimi movies. And their initial idea was, let's just have Spider-Man be like a guy that turns into like a half-man mutant spider. And I guess it was going to be more like a monster movie, but they just paid the rights to call it Spider-Man. That's the kind of stupid fucking shit that Hollywood does. And they had like a post-credit scene. I think they shot this afterwards. when they decided to turn it into a cinematic universe. They had a scene where it was Dracula in modern times, and he was meeting Mina from the novel. And it was, again, modern day version of Mina, I guess, which is like, okay, that's kind of neat, maybe. Also, I don't really give a shit. But then they show the vampire from the cave. He's also just sitting off to the side. Now he's like not creepy and ghoulish. It's the same guy. You can tell it's the same guy, but he's not all creepy and ghoulish. It's like made himself look younger, I guess. And that's when you get the line, "Let the games begin," which is supposed to kick off the cinematic universe, but it's fucking stupid. So they made Dracula cute, and they also kind of ruined the creepy cave vampire by bringing him in the modern times. Like, no, he needs to just stay in olden times. Let him be this ancient creature. You can't just have him sitting in the middle of a street. Like I said, I tried to like this movie. I like elements about it, but they just screwed it up. But it only gets worse from this point on. After that, we get The Mummy from 2017 with Tom Cruise. Oh, God. This is unironically probably the worst, at least the worst mainstream Hollywood movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, so I finally watched the Tom Cruise Mummy this year in prep for this video. I've been putting it off because it looks like shit. I'm not going to waste my time with that. But for this video, I decided to finally watch it. I checked it out on my library, so I didn't have to spend a cent, which is badass because this is not worth jack shit. In fact, I feel like my local library should pay me a little bit of money back for watching this, but I digress. So before I can even talk about the movie, I just got to talk about trying to physically watch the movie. So I typically watch DVDs on my desktop monitor. My computer refused to read the disc. My computer was just like, no, I will not play this. And I strongly suggest you reconsider watching it. Think of your health. It's like, sorry computer, it's for a YouTube video that nobody's gonna watch. I gotta do it. So instead I fired up my Blu-ray player and I put the disc in there instead. I was like, we'll try it in the Blu-ray player. If it doesn't work, then I'm just gonna say that's God from above telling me not to watch this fucking movie. My Blu-ray player struggled to play it. I had to kind of mess around with it. I had to hit play at a very weird moment, when they were doing the trailers. It was such a mess. The DVD just was malfunctioning. But I got it to work. I watched the movie, and now I just really wish the DVD didn't work. Okay, now I can actually talk about the movie. Okay, so first let's talk about this in terms of being a remake to the Universal Mummy film. This has nothing to do with the Universal Mummy film. Let's just get that out of the way right now. The original Karloff movie, there is no connective tissue. It takes a little bit from the Brendan Fraser films. Mainly there's a part in the Brendan Fraser films where the mummy turns into this big face in the sand, and they kind of did something like that, but it was a lot cheaper and lazier. There is a subplot about, it was hard to follow because it was so cheaply made. This movie sucks, but I guess the mummy is trying to resurrect her past lover. It didn't make sense. I really couldn't follow what was happening. It was so, in the Brendan Fraser, Stephen Sommers mummy films, everything is so clear and makes sense. They explain the mythology beautifully. The Karloff movie does the same. This one is just cheaply shot flashbacks of the past. It's a mess. So I think it's supposed to be she's trying to resurrect her past lover. It is a female mummy in this one, which they could have done something clever with that, but they didn't. That's just going to be a trend of not really doing anything clever. I think her name is Aminette in this one. I think if they were clever, so in the other movies, you have Imhotep is the main mummy trying to resurrect Anck-su-namun. I think it was Anck-su-namun in the Stephen Sommers movies. I don't remember if that was her name in the Karloff movie or not, but either way, they could have just switched those characters. So have Anck-su-namun be the mummy who comes back and she's trying to resurrect Imhotep. Now you can have your female universal monster while still sticking to the source material. I fixed your fucking movie. There you go. But they didn't do that because that was a good idea, and they're kind of allergic to those over in Hollywood. So they did every bad idea possible, starting with casting Tom Cruise as the lead, which is okay, so I said Dracula Untold was supposed to be the start of the cinematic universe. Well, that movie flopped, so they're just kidding. This movie is the start of a cinematic universe. And they were announcing, making a big deal that Tom Cruise was going to be in this movie kickstarting the cinematic universe for the Universal Monsters. And all I could think of as a Universal Monster fan is, who gives a shit? Was Tom Cruise ever in a horror movie? I actually don't think he was. The closest thing I can think of is Legend with Tim Curry as the Lord of Darkness, but that's like a dark fantasy. That's not a horror film. I don't think Tom Cruise was ever in a horror film, so it's like, who gives a shit? What are you doing? This would have been my idea just from the beginning. Make these low-budget remakes of the classic monsters, kind of like just try to make them not super gory, not super action-packed, but just deliberately paced, atmospheric horror films, and get some horror movie actors in them. Get Robert Englund, get Bill Moseley, Bruce Campbell. There you go. Imagine a Mummy remake with Bruce Campbell in it as your main lead. Or somebody, just anybody that actually makes sense, not Tom Cruise. I just wanted to mention, has a remake. This has nothing to do with the original movies. When I did finally watch the movie, I just got that idea out of my head. I was like, okay, I know this isn't a remake. I know this has nothing to do with the source material. They didn't give a shit about that. They just cared about making content, basically. So let's just view it as its own movie. And I tried to appreciate it as its own thing. And it was still so fucking awful. I guess I just got to start explaining. So, okay, Tom Cruise is our main lead, playing Who Gives a Shit. He is the most unlikable lead I've ever seen in a movie, ever. He just comes off as a douchebag. He's not romantic. He's not funny. He is no Brendan Fraser. Let me just say that. He's got a friend who, his name is, I don't fucking care. He ends up dying at some point, and you don't care because you didn't really have a chance to get attached to any of these characters. But then he sort of like comes back as like a zombie in the way that, if you've seen American Werewolf in London, you know how his friend comes back as a zombie in that movie? Yeah, they just copied that. Like, they just copied that exact idea, except they did a shittier version of it. Because, again, these are, like, characters that you don't like at all. And they didn't do the gradual rotting thing. Like, I think he just kind of stays the same. But then at the end of the movie, he comes back to life because, like, Tom Cruise has mummy powers now or something. Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Tom Cruise gets mummy powers, so he can't die or something. Because I guess he was supposed to be, like, the main superhero of the cinematic universe, because they didn't understand what a horror movie is supposed to be. They're just, do what Marvel's doing, blah, 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 whatever, who fucking cares. Would have made more sense if they just got, like, Von Helsing, but I guess they're like, well, the Von Helsing with Hugh Jackman was a flop over 10 years ago. Like, come on, it was over 10 years ago. You could have done a different take on it. It's not the character of Von Helsing, if that was their thought process. Like, if they actually considered having Von Helsing being their main protagonist of the universe, but then decided not to because of the Hugh Jackman movie, that would be so fucking stupid. It's like, Von Helsing as a character has been around so much longer than that, and has worked plenty of times. Yeah, it's just astonishing how not a single good idea was utilized. Like, and you know, like when you think of Universal monster films, you think of classy gothic scenery, and I don't want to hear the bullshit about like, well, those movies just aren't very successful nowadays. Then just don't make the movie. Don't reboot the Universal monsters if that's the issue. Maybe you should just wait till the time is right. Don't force it, which is kind of what they're doing. So instead, they're like, it's modern times. It's very ugly. This is such an ugly looking movie. Boring characters, ugly aesthetics. Even the mummy, who is a mummy. She's a monster. She should be a little bit more interesting. She's boring. She sucks. I don't like her. Tom Cruise has a love interest, I think, or something. I don't really care. She's boring. Who gives a shit? Literally the only character in this entire film who's interesting. This is the only good thing I have to say about the movie, which is also a bad thing, because this should not be the only good thing about your mummy movie. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is in this film, played by Russell Crowe. I kind of like the approach. Unlike anything related to the mummy in this film, when you look at Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you're like, somebody at least watched a movie, maybe even read the book. Somebody actually understands this character. You know, basically, I guess the idea, he was supposed to be the Nick Fury of the cinematic universe for the Universal Monsters or whatever, which is fucking stupid that we needed that to begin with. But the way he depicts the character has Henry Jekyll, very mild-mannered English gentleman. Like, yeah, okay, it's Dr. Jekyll, we get it. And then he turns into Mr. Hyde later. Like, he has like some sort of like, almost like an insulin kind of needle, but more sci-fi looking. That's sort of like the potion that keep him from turning into Hyde. And at one point, Tom Cruise doesn't allow him to use it, which for all Tom Cruise knows, that could have been like literally insulin to keep him from dying or something. But Tom Cruise was having like a fit about something, and he took it from him, and then he ended up turning into Mr. Hyde. Just to further my point, Tom Cruise is unbelievably unlikable in this film. Just total dog shit. Just a total dog shit piece of fucking garbage. His character in the movie sucks too. When Russell Crowe turns into Mr. Hyde, this is probably the first faithful adaptation of the character I'd seen in a while. I mean, like I said, in Van Helsing, he turns into a big hulking Mr. Hyde. So in this movie, it's a very subtle transformation. They showed a lot of restraint. He barely even turns into a monster. He just kind of becomes evil looking. His eyes get kind of creepy, but it's like, you could see this. It makes me wish, instead of this stupid fucking Mummy movie, it makes me wish they just did a modern day remake of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Russell Crowe. Just, tell the same story from the novel, but, just with this version of the character. It probably would have worked. You don't even have to follow the novel that closely, because I feel like people are going to get the idea that I'm like a purist, that things have to be so faithful to the source material. Like, no, I love to see changes. I love to see interpretations. I love to see how you can mess around with things. But when you ignore every ounce of the source material, I've decided to come up with a new term for this, okay? We need to make this a thing. So you have like sequels, spin-offs, remakes, reboots. You have all these different things you can do with an IP. Well, we need to create this new term. I'm calling it refakes. A refake. It's when a studio actually takes the time to get the rights of a specific thing, a movie, a comic, TV show, whatever it is. They actually pay to get the rights, and then they go on to make a movie that has nothing to do with what they paid to get the rights for. I think that's kind of what happened with like the House of Wax movie from 2006. Yeah, refake. It's like you paid for the rights, but then you didn't adapt the thing you paid for the rights for. It's beyond my imagination that such a thing should even exist, but here we are. So after the 2017 Mummy, Universal kind of decided to give up on the cinematic universe thing, which is probably for the best. So in 2020, Universal decided to hand the Universal Monsters over to their horror subdivision called Blumhouse. And that's when we get The Invisible Man from 2020. Overall, I didn't like this movie. I didn't hate it either. It's fine. It's a fine kind of sci-fi thriller. Like it's fine. It's a good movie. It's just, I didn't love it. It's not really my taste. And this is definitely a refake. This is not a remake to The Invisible Man. It goes out of its way to avoid everything from the source material. I think the only thing that it keeps is The Invisible Man's last name is Griffin. They didn't even use his first name, Jack. In the book, in the original movie, he uses a serum that he injects into his skin. In this movie, he uses a super suit. A suit that he can take on and off at any time to transform into a invisible man. Where do I start with that? So first off, by getting away from the cinematic universe approach and going into a low-budget horror movie territory, they're basically saying we're not going to try to be Marvel anymore. Which is good. That's good. That's awesome. That's a step in the right direction. But then they give the Invisible Man a super suit, which is like, okay, that's basically Iron Man, Ant-Man. It's the same shit. This is shit from Marvel. Characters that have a super suit that gives them a power. And then it's like, I've heard so many people talk about how, well, you couldn't do it with like the serum. That's not realistic enough, or they had to update that. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? How is a serum any more or less realistic than a super suit? I hate it when people say you have to update things as a way to just basically dismiss any criticism. Like, this has nothing to do with updating. They just changed something in a way that's stupid. So again, we're talking about this in terms of a remake. So I don't like the super suit idea. I don't like that the only thing they really kept is that he turns invisible and his last name is Griffin. Like, they could have used a lot more from the source material and still did a new original thing. The big idea behind this movie is that it's like a domestic kind of thriller where the Invisible Man is basically like an abusive ex-boyfriend or husband or what. I forget, honestly. And he's like gaslighting his ex to they're trying to make her look crazy. And it's an interesting idea. And they could have took that same idea of the abusive ex-lover gaslighting his ex and fit it into the original story. That's kind of what Hammer would have done. Hammer, they're the master of class, baby. They know how to take these classic stories, update them, change them, but keep the right elements the same. That's key to you're allowed to change certain things. You're allowed to change certain names. You're allowed to change certain story beats, certain details. You can change the time period. You can change all kinds of things. But you can't change everything. And this Invisible Man movie just went out of its way to basically change everything, which comes off as a little smug. Like, yeah, fuck that stupid old movie. That to me, that's how it reads. While I will say it's a fine, good movie, it does leave a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't like watching it. They could have taken the original source material, book or movie, they're pretty close, and adapted it to be more modern and add some new elements. Then there was that one shot where the main girl's in the hospital, and they show a guy with bandages on his face, and everyone's like, "Oh, did you love that nod to the original movie? Wasn't that clever?" Like, no, it fucking wasn't. That was stupid. That was so fucking stupid, and I want to punch you for even implying that was clever. You know what would have been clever is if they were able to adapt the original source material, but update it for modern times, which they did not do. They went out of their way to avoid doing that. Several years later, we get Renfield from 2023. Once again, I didn't love this movie. As you can tell by the title, this movie focuses on Dracula's assistant, Renfield. In this movie, this is meant to be a comedy, which, like, I'm fine. There's, like, Dracula, Love at First Bite, Dracula Dead and Loving It. Those are comedies about Dracula. And, yeah, you know what? I love those movies. That's right. I love Dracula Dead and Loving It. Go cry about it. So yeah, I was fine with the comedy. They were going to have Nicolas Cage as Dracula, giving a very dramatic, over-the-top performance. He did great. He was great in this movie. I love his Dracula. I just don't love the movie. First off, there's an intro in the movie that's like black and white. They recreate scenes from the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. That is so cute. I love that. After that, though, the movie just becomes whatever. I don't even know what it is. Actually, I do know what it is. It's a Deadpool knockoff. We put that little bit in the beginning, get the Universal fans all geeked out. Now we can just make our Deadpool knockoff. Go, we gotta cash in on that Deadpool fame. That's what it is. It's a superhero comedy with lots of gore. In this movie, there's this whole thing about, like, when Renfield eats bugs, he gets superpowers and can, like, annihilate everyone around him. I guess that's kind of a neat idea. Maybe if it did more to appeal to me as a Universal Monster fan, I would have liked it more. Like if it had more, like, gothic, like, let's have a fight scene in a cemetery with lots of fog, and let's have Renfield pick up a tombstone and smash a guy's head with it. So there, now you can have your over-the-top Deadpool knockoff, but you can still get some classic horror visuals in there, you know? I don't know, it's just fine. I'll probably never watch it again. So this is kind of bizarre. They actually did 2 Dracula movies in the same year. So what do I have to say about The Last Voyage of the Demeter? I mean, I feel like out of all the recent Universal Monster films, this is the least talked about. Like, just, you know, and I mean, I'm mainly referring to, like, my life, my terminally online life on Twitter and whatnot. People seem to really talk a lot about Renfield the same year. Last Voyage of the Demeter was just kind of like, oh yeah, they're doing this too. And that sucks so bad because this is the only one from this era that hit the nail firmly on the head and planted it in the wood with one swack. Like, it is that perfect. Well, I mean, it has a few nitpicky issues that I'll get into, but basically this is just a fantastic gothic horror film. And Dracula is legitimately scary in this. Like, there are shots in this film where I'm just like, ooh, that's creepy, you know, like I don't really get scared from horror movies that much. You know, it doesn't matter if it's new, old, whatever subgenre, like almost nothing affects me, but this movie kind of got a few like, ooh, that's kind of creepy. Like, the design of Dracula in this film is just so heebie-jeebies, very Nosferatu-like, kind of going with that approach. If you don't know, this is basically an entire film based around Dracula's voyage from Transylvania to England on the ship called the Demeter. And there's a lot of good characters. You really get invested with everyone. This feels like a movie made for adults, which is kind of like something you're not getting a lot. This feels like people that care about classic literature and classic cinema. You know, that thing that I keep mentioning is like dying and going away. I feel like there's a little bit of it left. And the people that made this movie, they're part of that group. The performances are great. All the characters are great. There's characters that die. And you're like, no, I didn't want that person to die. This is sad. I feel emotions. Where a lesser horror movie would just be like, oh, we won't kill that person. We don't want to upset you in our horror film. This movie doesn't fucking care. You just get ready. They're going to rustle your jimmies up. Dracula is evil and nasty in this film. I will get into my nitpicks really quick because they really don't matter, but some of the CGI shots, like, they do use a lot of CGI in this movie, but it's very, like, subtly used where you wouldn't even notice most of it. Like, the water around the ship is all CGI. But there are some CGI shots, and I'm like, that's a little over the top. It doesn't really take me out of the movie that much. Like, it's fine. I know there's one part Dracula jumps up and rips a guy's throat out. And to me, that felt a little too over the top, but overall, it's fine. And then I didn't like the ending because it kind of felt like they're trying to do like a Marvel Cinematic Universe setting up at a sequel ending. It's a nitpick, it's fine, it really doesn't matter much. The 99% of this movie is gold. So good. If you love classic gothic horror, if you love the Universal monsters, I highly recommend this one. The Wolfman, coming out in 2025. I have extremely low expectations for this movie so far. It's directed by, what is his name? Leigh Whannell. I probably pronounced it wrong, but I believe he's the same guy that did the Invisible Man movie in 2020. So the guy that directed the Invisible Man movie that went out of its way to avoid the source material. So yeah, I'm not really excited about what he does with the Wolfman. I've seen the trailer for the film so far, so I can kind of only really base it on that. And it looks like it's going to be the same shit. It looks like it's going to have nothing to do with the original film. Really making me miss, like we took the 2010 movie for granted. Good Lord. What a beautiful retelling of that story while still making some creative changes. Based on kind of what I've read, it seems like this director, he's kind of said something about how he's not like very interested in like the throwback nostalgia thing, and that people don't care about that, which is beyond ridiculous if you look at like all of the 80s nostalgia crowd that's constantly getting shoved in our face. It's just a little ignorant to say that. I don't know exactly what he meant by that. I could probably do a lot more research and try to figure out more kind of like his stance on these things. But considering that this movie has not come out yet, I don't want to get too crazy with what I have to say. These are just my predictions. I think it's just going to be another refake. It's just going to be a werewolf movie. This is not going to be The Wolfman with Larry Talbot. It's not going to be... Like, he could have even done, like, a modern-day retelling, which, you know, most of these stories haven't really had a modern-day retelling. Like, you could have done... I mean, I'd prefer it to be a period piece in Gothic. That's kind of what I dig, but I can also get into a modern-day retelling. But, yeah, it's just, we're not doing this. I'm looking at all the, like, the advertising. It just looks like another bland as shit, boring Blumhouse movie, and... I'm not holding it back. I'm not a fan of Blumhouse. I think they're just like a factory that turns out bland garbage, like just flavorless horror movies. Every now and then they'll make like maybe a good one by accident, but that's definitely more of an exception, not so much the rule. It feels so tacky to see a trailer for this unrelated movie, and then at the end you just see The Wolfman. It's like, oh, fuck you. My theory that I know they're not going to do because it's clever is they've been shown footage of this, like, it's an actor in a costume. It's supposed to be a werewolf from this Wolfman movie. That it looks really weird. It's a really weird design. If it was an original werewolf movie, pretty good design. Like, it's different. Okay, I can get behind it, but has the Wolfman? Definitely no. But I think it's been confirmed this isn't the Wolfman. This is like the werewolf that attacks the guy that becomes the Wolfman or something. But my theory is that, like, what if that werewolf, he kind of looks like an old man werewolf, what if that's actually Larry Talbot from the original movies and this is secretly a legacy sequel? So we've actually gone from the 40s into the modern age. See, like, that would have been like a clever thing to do. But I don't think they're going to do that. Hollywood hates clever things. But yeah, that's all the movies to date. I'm sure there will be more. They're probably going to be just as disappointing. Or if they are up to my standards, then they're probably going to be a box office failure. So that's really awesome. So yeah, there it is. Every Universal monster film, and in some cases some TV shows in the later years. Again, I would like to blame the modern kind of Blumhouse over Marvelified era as being kind of the death of these characters, but really after the 50s it was pretty much done. Even the 50s weren't the greatest era for these characters other than the creature. There was just a specific time period. I mean, 1913 through the 50s, that's hardly a time period. That's a huge chunk of time, but that era, that whole period right there, it seems like the only time where Universal knew what to do with these characters in films. I mean, afterwards, I mean, they for a while they would use them at like the theme parks. They had costume characters that looked great. I don't think they do those anymore even. They had the Beetlejuice Graveyard Review, which I saw when I was very young. It's very cheesy, but it's still fun if you can get the right mindset. They do great with merchandise. They're still making great like action figures and plushies and all kinds of crap like that. You know, that's great. But in terms of making new films, I think nobody does the Universal monsters better than anyone who's not Universal. In the 80s, we had movies like The Monster Squad. Then you got like Bram Stoker's Dracula, even Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is not as good as the Dracula. Honestly, both those movies have flaws, but they're leagues ahead of what Universal's been doing with the characters. Even Disney did a Hunchback of Notre Dame film in the 90s. That should not have worked as well as it did, but it is fantastic. Just, nah. Now I'm hearing Disney is planning on doing some sort of a Phantom of the Opera young adult movie. Like I said, nobody does Universal Monsters better than not Universal, so maybe it'll actually be good. I don't know. People are a little bit worried about it so far, but my expectations are so low on anything anymore. I don't get myself hyped up, so I guess I won't be disappointed. That's my little retrospective. I just really wanted to talk about this, mainly because I love these characters so much. Ever since I was a wee little kitten, I loved these movies. Technically, Hocus Pocus was the first thing that got me into the horror genre. That's what my family says. I watched that movie a lot when I was little, so I can see it. But around the same era, I started getting into the, Dracula, Frankenstein, and so on. I had this neat little book that was shaped like a coffin called Cramped Quarters. And you flip the page and each monster was like cramped in the coffin, and you flip the page and the next one is pushing the other one out. And the artwork was super creepy. And when you squeeze it, their eyes light up and it made that music that you know the tune I'm talking about. Every piece of shit Halloween decoration makes that noise. And it scared the hell out of me. It was so creepy. But I loved it. I needed more. And then eventually I started watching the movies. I remember I got the set of stamps, the Universal Monster postage stamps. I had those for years in a frame. Unfortunately, it got lost in a storage unit, but I had them since I was like a wee little kid. I don't even think I could read. I was so little. That's where I first saw the Phantom of the Opera. And it's like, oh, I know Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy. I know all these guys, but who's this new one that I've never seen before? That's like exciting stuff right there. That's like a new world opening up. It's crazy to think about, but like, yeah, the Phantom basically became my favorite after that. Like I saw the movie we're watching right now on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. We rented it from the library. Any normal kid, I guess, should be bored by this, but I was so like, wow, this is so cool. The point I'm getting at is that these movies really had a big effect on me, shaping me into the little weirdo that you're watching right now. I hope moving forward, Universal respects the fact that these are characters, not generic concepts. Like, you can modernize them, set them in modern times, you can add gore, you can do whatever. I want to see different takes, but I still want the core elements to remain. Obviously, there's bigger issues in the world. I'm not losing sleep over this. It's just something that I'm passionate about and would like to talk about. Just in case somebody wanted to comment that, there's like starving children or some shit. Like, I know, I'm not stupid. I'm just having fun here.